Hey, do you remember? It burns! After the modest success of my review of Hero 108, I thought about other obscure 2000s cartoons that I could revisit to see if they were any good, and that reminded me of another very similar show, that being the subject of today's video. Yin Yang Yo is the creation of one Bob Boyle, who you might know as creating the show Wow Wow Wubbzy. Don't look that show up without safe search on. The show staff included many people who worked on more recognizable shows, particularly Butch Hartman shows like The Fairly OddParents and Danny Phantom, as well as other shows like 16 and Clone High, aka the most underrated show turned most overrated show in the course of about a couple months. You heard what I said. Most notable of the crew is the head writer Steve Marmel, a massive anime fan. His influence on the writing of the show helped a lot in establishing the show's most defining features. More on that later, however. The show focuses on two twin rabbits, a blue rabbit boy named Yang, and a pink rabbit girl named Yin. With the guidance of their sensei, Master Yo, the two learn the martial art Wu Fu, with Yang being skilled in physical combat and Yin being proficient in magical combat. Together they work to defend the world from the greatest evils, such as Scots, skinheads, capitalism, and the unsanitary GF. It's like what my boy Karl Marx says, capitalism will only steer us wrong. Speaking of the theme song, did you know it was performed by the one and only Kyle Massey? If you don't recognize his name, he's well known for being Cory from Cory in the Fucking House, the classic shonen anime. The main two characters are definitely as cookie cutter as it really gets though. Yang is the stereotypical young boy protagonist in that he's rude, gross, and aggressive, like Timmy Turner but with a temper. Yin is similarly a stereotypical female character with a pinch of brainiac on the side. Her main character traits are nagging Yang for his lack of attentiveness and responsibility, as well as being interested in vapid things such as shopping, clothes, and whatnot, even being lured by villains through the promise of fancy clothes and jewelry. The show tries to be smart and point out how stereotypical it is, but it doesn't really work when you continue to do it multiple times. The main characters aren't awful or anything, but you've seen them somewhere before at least once. Either way, what really makes the show are things relating to them and the other characters of the show. For instance, their sensei, Master Yo, a panda with an expertise in Wufu. Also, can I just say that that's a really dumb name for an art of fighting? Firstly, it sounds like the term used to refer to sex in the Sims video games, and it's worse when you consider how people refer to the 2020 plague as the Wu Flu, which sounds remarkably similar. There's even an episode titled Wu Fu Flu. Anyways, I went into the show thinking Master Yo would sound like an old Asian man, but instead he has the voice of a middle-aged black man.
Yin and Yang, my tiny rabbit students. Lesson number 1. Beware of the strange and mysterious powers of the breakfast burrito. The foe that is eaten is not always beaten. You know what I'm talking about there, don't you?
Man, that is way off from what I thought it would sound like. After watching more episodes, I kinda got somewhat used to it, but even after watching the whole series, I still maintain that they should have gone with an Asian voice actor instead. Is it stereotypical? I mean, sure, but I think it would have fit much better. The interesting part about Yo is that despite being an expert in the art and having shown multiple times that he's perfectly able to take care of foes himself, he often leaves Yin and Yang to deal with enemies themselves, mostly out of laziness. I think that's a pretty funny turn for the character personally. Aside from that, he typically poses as an obstacle for the main two to give certain plots more stakes, either through Yo's actions or lack of action. Besides the main cast, we also have the show's supporting characters, who are the very definition of hit or miss. There's Lena, Yin's best friend and Yang's love interest. She's a good supporting character and manages to provide good support, although the show always feels the need to point out how she's sassy. Considering that she's voiced by a black woman, I really can't tell if it's racist or not, but yeah. There's Dave, who manages to both be annoying and kinda cool depending on what he's doing. For the most part though, it's pretty funny to see the show constantly shit on this tree kid, although that's probably just me. And then there's Coop. I hate him. No particular reason, just feel like it.
Hey, how long have you been following me? How many seconds does it have to be before it's creepy?
Well, the main cast are pretty standard and unsurprising for the most part. Where the show really shines is in the show's rogues gallery of villains. Similarly to something like the Powerpuff Girls, for the most part, there's a consistent group of antagonists within the series that appear and reappear throughout. The main cast faces a large variety of enemies during the series, ranging from the brooding Nightmaster to the hammy Ultimus, to the annoying Zarnot, to the suggestive Saranoia. I mean, come on, look at this outfit, they knew what they were doing. The villains are all great for the most part, with many having their own identities from each other and leave a lasting impact on the viewer. They all have great aspects to them, and you're bound to really grow attached to at least one of them. My personal favorites are Carl, the evil cockroach wizard, yes, you have to say his entire name, for how over the top and flamboyant he is, as well as Smoke because I wanted to step on me. Did you know that one of the villains in the show was actually voiced by the world's most beloved cartoon visionary? Yeah, Seth MacFarlane, of course. Seth MacFarlane himself is the voice of the Manator character. He does a great job voicing the character, but the funny part is that they either ran out of budget or couldn't get him to re-record lines because they occasionally replace his voice with a different actor during certain parts of the same fucking episode.
It's what we Manator call urban renewal, when really it's just, simple greed. Away, my magic briefcase! Fly!
Man, how did they screw that up? To be fair, it is pretty cool to see Seth MacFarlane actually voice a character within this relatively obscure show, and considering that this was 2006, after Seth MacFarlane got big from Family Guy, and after American Dad premiered, I think it's actually pretty cool that they got Seth MacFarlane to voice a character who appears in 2 episodes. Great villains isn't the only aspect the show excels at, however, so let's talk about the structure of the show's stories. One would expect the show to be purely episodic, villain of the week kind of affair, and to an extent, it's very much like that. To an extent. Let me explain. While many of the episodes have their own self-contained stories, each season has their own overarching story arcs, involving one overarching season villain, with them being defeated during the season finale. And it's not something that's just kind of put in the background. Specific episodes have events that contribute to this overarching story and are essentially vital for understanding certain things later on. The show came out back in 2006, so the idea of a Western cartoon doing this was basically unheard of at the time, and it wasn't as widespread until Adventure Time started doing it after 2010. In that aspect, Yin Yang Yo is kind of somewhat of a pioneer in doing this with its show, or one could say it did it before it was cool. In fact, this aspect likely came from Steve Marmol, taking a page from big anime and anime-esque shows from the time, such as Fooly Cooly and Teen Titans. And this show was pretty unapologetic with how big of a homage it is to anime. Literally, the first episode of the second season is just Pokemon, and the anime references don't just stop there. Did it do story arcs well? Well, that depends on how you like cartoons to handle them. Yin Yang Yo takes a specific approach in that only certain episodes are necessary in understanding the story as it develops, meaning that if you miss or skip a particular episode, you could be missing vital information that is important for understanding the story of a future episode. This is especially important for the double-length episodes that typically rely on the viewer being caught up in everything that's happened in the story thus far. If you're the type of person who's willing to watch all of the series to get the general understanding of it, then this is probably fine for you, but keep in mind that only certain episodes contribute to the story arc, and determining which episodes are important to watch is mostly based on dumb luck. Man, when Steve Marmol took inspiration from anime, I didn't think he meant it so literally that he would include filler episodes. Besides events that contribute to arcs, the show also dabbles in character development as well. Specifically, characters actually learn new abilities and grow stronger over the course of the series. Other shows typically give characters mostly static abilities that don't change much, if at all, between the first and last episode, but Yin and Yang go from knowing barely anything about Wufu to being able to do all kinds of neat shit in the show. Not only that, but we see them learning these new abilities in episodes, so it isn't something that just kinda comes out of thin air. It's nothing big or all too significant, but for 2006, it's pretty cool to see a cartoon do something like this. Yin Yang Yo is classified as a comedy, and it definitely tries its hand at being comedic, but I don't really think it pans out all too well. A lot of the show relies on what has been dubbed as Butch Hartman humor. It's hard to exactly pinpoint, but it's the type of stuff you definitely know when you see it. That being said, the show does manage to sneak in the occasional adult joke from time to time, and they come so far from left field that it's honestly kinda great.
Oh my gosh, she can read minds?
That'd be a yes.
But just remember, being a woman does not make me a maid!
No, see, being a maid makes you a maid.
And of course, we couldn't cover the show without talking about its unique art style. Yin Yang Yo is a flash animated show, and it's pretty obvious when you see the show in motion. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, but it explains a lot of both the design of the show and its shortcomings when it comes to the animation. The show has a very geometric style to its art. I've often heard the critique that designing a flash show with relatively simple shapes is lazy or something, but I've never understood that complaint. Especially in the mid-2000s, Flash animation was a new avenue for how animation could be produced, and creating an art style that worked well with the limitations and advantages of the medium is exactly how you're supposed to handle using different means of creating art. Plus, so long as the art style is appealing, I mean, who cares? Yin Yang Yo moves fluidly enough for the most part, and the backgrounds look nice. You can definitely tell that the show cuts corners when it comes to the action scenes though, as at least the first season features these mostly solid color backgrounds, which kinda takes away from the action, feels kinda disjointed from the setting of the show. Maybe that's just me though. One big flaw with the digital art, however, is how the show zooms in on backgrounds and the like, where the pixelated raster backgrounds look even worse. Yikes, looks like someone forgot to turn on the anti-aliasing. The episode that suffers from this the worst is Yin Yang Yu, where the characters get transported to a fresh TV cartoon. Although I guess the art style makes sense given that it is a Canadian cartoon. While the backgrounds are often drawn to accommodate for human characters, when the animal characters get involved, it's when the backgrounds actually melt into this god-awful 144p mess of pixels. And this happens for almost every shot in the episode. That being said, for most of the series, it isn't too bad of an issue. The art style shines when it comes to the character design. The characters have these simplified geometric designs that remind me a lot of Symbol and logo design, and as a big fan of Symbol and logo design, I'm a big fan of this direction. The style also helps keep each character distinct and unique and highlight their traits, things that are important to character design. Each character has a unique silhouette, and their shape often relates to their personality, like how the main characters typically have rounder designs since they're innocent, while the villains often have sharper designs to highlight how sinister they are. It's all just great design. I don't know, a part of me feels like I'm giving this show an easier time than it maybe deserves. I mean, when I started watching this show, I was kind of taken aback at the first few episodes, as they kind of failed to really leave an impression on me. I was kind of a little nervous, thinking, man, was this show actually not all I thought it was going to be cracked up to be? But as I kept watching and watched more and more, I started really enjoying my time with the show, and I was even kind of a little down when it all ended, even if the second half of the second season had its issues with its villain and whatnot. But honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed my time watching Yin Yang Yo. Do I recommend it? I guess that all really depends on what your thoughts are based on this review. It's definitely not a show for everyone, and it has its own fair share of issues, but if you're interested in a show based on this review, then give it a shot. The entire series is available on YouTube thanks to the channel Disney Replay, so give it a chance.